everybody, welcome back. So I know I skipped last week. I was just busy with a lot of things going on. But this time I'm going to use that bodice block, which is just the front, back, and the little sleeve that we made earlier. Please see those videos. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll stick a link below. But I'm going to use that just to make a basic little top. This is going to be the very first iteration of it. Now, one of the things I'm going to be doing as I move forward with this is, as I make a change in the design of my bodice, or my pattern block, I'll say, I'm going to actually save that piece. So this time what I'm going to do is make a small change, well, actually a fairly large change in the sleeve, to get a more of a bell sleeve than the standard one. And I'm also going to change the dart placement in the bodice. So then once I do that, I'm just going to save those new pieces, you know, put them in my archive. So from now on, I will have a new pattern piece that has darts in a new place, or a bell sleeve that fits my arm, and things like that. So it's not just a one and done kind of thing. It's like saving that template, you know, so I can use it later. So let me tip the camera down. I'll just get a pencil and give you a rough sketch of what I'm going to be doing, and then we'll get into it. Okay, so if you remember, the bodice block piece only goes to the waist at this point. I haven't done, you know, from the waist down. And so just to make life easy without throwing too many changes into one video, what I've decided to do is to make a shorter blouse, kind of a crop that ends at the waist, okay? So let's say that is my waist. Right now I have it, my block looks like I have a huge dart coming in the side. What I'm going to do is divide that up so I have a dart at the side and one at the bottom. So I'm going to be splitting that difference. Also for the sleeve, right now it looks kind of like this, okay? Which is fine, and it does fit me. But what I'm going to be doing is making it more into a wider sleeve, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that, pivoting the top and everything. But basically the collar, I am not putting a collar on this one. I was toying with the idea, but again, there's so many things you can do, and I think that for simplicity's sake, I'm going to try to just, you know, keep things simple. So instead of a collar, I'm just going to do a basic facing, you know, around that neckline. And I know this makes no sense to you. It's just me talking. So, and then I am going to have it button up the front, and I'm going to put a little band around the bottom to hold it all together. That's going to be it in a nutshell, just a cute little basic top. So let me get my pieces down here, and we'll get started with the bodice front one first. So what I have here is my original block with my big old side dart, and I just have I'm using butcher paper today. And so what I'm going to do is just, you know, put my center front along that front line, and just with a pencil for right now, because I'm going to be changing a lot of things, just trace around this so I have a good starting point. And remember, I did use a heavier paper for my bodice block, just so it's easy to trace around, because tracing around tissue paper is not quite as easy. So here, oh dear, my bird feeder is empty, and I've got them knocking on the window. Hang on, let me go get some of that. And I know you probably cannot see this. That's okay. I am going to make things darker soon. But let me do that, and I will be right back. Okay, so I cut out my little piece here, just folded it so that my little dart openings would be together. So I have a crease here. Get my handy dandy sewing tool and draw that circle in, okay? There's my little apex circle. Now what I'm going to want to do on this, if I put a dot in the middle, that is the highest, biggest point of my bust right there. Okay. What I want is to divide this space so I have a smaller dart here and one underneath. So the dart that's coming underneath, I want it to be on the straight. So I'm keeping this center front on the straight on my grid underneath. Okay. And should get a bigger ruler just to make this obvious. All right, let's get the old ruler out here. I know it's worn out, but it works. Okay, so if I put this here, I have about 3 3/8 inch here. So from this point, that center point of my circle straight down, I'm going to make a line. Now, this is my technique. This is not, you know, what everyone else in the world is going to do, but it works for me. So just letting you know. I'm cutting up to that outside part of the circle. And then I'm cutting around the circle between the 2 darts that I want to manipulate, okay? Let me put a couple weights on here to hold it so it's not going to want to move. All right, so this was here, all right? Oh, you can't see that. There you go. So this was here. To split it up, I'm just going to move this over, but keeping this rotating around that circle like that. Sure. That looks like about the same amount. What I'm looking at is the outside edge. Not looking up here right now, just the outside edge. We're not even dealing with that right now. Okay? Looking here. Does that look good to me? I think so. I think that's about half and half. Okay, so I'm going to put a piece of tape there just to hold it for right now. Now, we're going to redraw these lines. So from this outside edge to the center point here, and I can see there's a small spot right here. I can kind of see where those 2 layers of paper overlap, and this is the center of it. All right, you see that point? So what I'm going to do is from this outside corner, draw a line here, and from this outside corner, draw a line here. Okay, that's going to be my new sewing line for that dart. Now this one's a little different here because it's whiter. So what I need to do is get a piece of paper. I'm going to stick it underneath here because it'll make my life easier. Just ignore the dogs barking out there. And I'm not going to put tape on yet just because it's harder to draw on tape, but I'm going to eyeball between these 2 points here where the center is. And it's going to be right here, which is about 1/8 of an inch over. That's fine. That is close enough to center for me. So, actually, it would be better if I put some tape up here just to make sure nothing moves. I need to hold that. All right, so just like before, to this center dot, from this corner down here, I'm going to draw a line. And too many things going on here. From that center dot to this corner, I'm going to draw a line. Okay, and that is my new sewing line for the bottom dart. So now I can go ahead and put more tape because the pencil line is already down there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go ahead and cut out this pattern with these 2 lines, and that's going to be my bodice front pattern for this blouse. Okay, so that is what it looks like. And after I make this blouse, I'll know for sure that that works well. And then I'll have this piece that I can keep, which is just a variation off of my basic one. Okay, so let me put that away. The bodice back piece that I made, I'm using it as is. So we're not going to make any modifications on that one today. But let me go get my sleeve piece and we'll work on that. Okay, so this is my sleeve block. And just like I just did earlier, I'm just putting it on my butcher paper and I'm just going to lightly trace around it with a pencil and then cut out along that pencil line. I'm going to make sure I transfer my center mark, and I'm going to label which side is the back and which side is the front. So let me get that done and I'll be right back. I just realized I was doing stuff and didn't have the camera turned on. So let me tell you what I'm doing. I've got my sleeve pattern piece here. I lined up the center with one of my grid lines. You know, this is pretty much straight down here. And I drew a line straight down that center point, okay? Now on the sleeves, this is the back, that's the front, that's why they're shaped different. But there's a point where the curve goes from curving this way to curving that way. Just eyeballing where that is, it's right about here. So from that point, again going straight down on my grid, I put a line here, okay? And did the same thing over here, where that curve changes from going this way to that way, put another mark and drew a line straight down. So these three lines are parallel, okay? I'm gonna do one more set of lines here, about halfway between these two. So if this is 4.5 inches, I need a line that's about 2 1/4 in the middle. So I'm gonna put one here, and if that's 2 1/4 should be right about here. Okay, now the sleeve that I want, it's going to be an easygoing bell sleeve. I mean, you're going to be able to make this as big as you want. I just want it big enough that I have freedom of movement, but it's not a dramatic fluttering kind of sleeve. So what I'm going to do is cut each one of these lines up, but I'm going to leave it attached up here at the top. So I'm going to cut up to about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, okay? I'm going to do that on all of the lines. So I have that done, but before I go any further, what I want is, I have cut my block, my sleeve block, at a length that's going to end right about here. That's what I like. It's like right above my elbow. That's a perfect length for me for a lot of sleeves because it doesn't get in my way, hides my big upper arms, all that stuff. But what I want to know is how wide I want it around down here so that I get the effect I want, you know, and you make it however you want to, but it's going to be fitting me well. So this, at this point, is 16 inches. It's a little bit full, but it's not too huge. I think if I went much bigger than that, it might start to get in my way. Maybe not. That's 18. It could be fun. Let's see. So if this is my original piece here, how wide is it down here? It's 14 inches. Well, 14 1/4. So that means if I want this to end up 18 inches, I'm going to have to add 1, 2, 3 3/4 inches, okay? So let me just write that down before I forget. And for the simplicity of it all, we're going to say plus 4 inches. That's easier math than 3 3/4. So then getting out my handy dandy calculator, 4 inches divided by 5 spaces equals 0.8 inches, okay? 0.8 is, well, 3/4 is 0.75, all right? 7/8 is 0.875, just, you know, from working in fabric stores over the years. So this is a little point between 3/4 and 7/8. We're going to call it 3/4 of an inch, okay? So what that means to me is down here at the bottom, when I spread it out, I'm going to want approximately 3/4 of an inch spacing between all of these. So I'm going to get another piece of paper, this is just to play with here, and put it down, and we're going to tape that onto here. And I'm using the yellowish paper, artsy paper here, just so that we can see the difference between the bright white and that, hopefully. So I've got my piece of paper. I'm just going to start folding it in half so I have a center point. Okay. My goodness. Let me get some weights because this is going to get annoying if I don't. All right, my center point is right here. That's my crease. I'm gonna get my little arts and crafts project here and line that up here and just put a piece of tape where that is, okay, just to hold it together. Now coming down here, holding those two, get my ruler. Remember, we're going with 3/4 of an inch, okay? I'm going to space these two out, so at the bottom I am just over 3/4 of an inch between them, and I have my centered line here, so which is right there's my center line. So the very first one I'm going to kind of split the difference. After that it doesn't matter. Okay, so here's 3/4, 3/8 of an inch is the halfway point, and put one side here, and tape it down. Okay, so now we're started. And we're just going to keep on keeping on. The top should hold the right shape, all right? So I'm going to come to this next piece, get another little piece of tape, put my ruler here, hit the edge, move this over to where it's, you know what, I'm going to tape the top too. Tape that top so it doesn't want to stretch down out of shape. And then tape the bottom here 3/4 of an inch apart. Okay? And then again over here, tape it down at the top. And when I'm taping it at the top, I have it basically spread approximately close to it. So, and put this at 3/4 of an inch or thereabouts. Okay, and then the edge is just the edge, but you know, I'll put a piece of tape there too, just for funsies. All right, now let me go ahead and do the same thing over here. All right, so that is my new sleeve. So I think the easiest thing to do is just going to be to kind of trace the corners over here, because they're going to want to move as I cut. Okay, and over here, draw this line down. Okay, and then as I cut this out, I'm just going to kind of even out the bottom edge here. So let's just get started. And cut all the way up to that line I just drew. And you know what, I am going to tape down up here and over here to make it easier for me once I get to the top. Okay. Cut up this line. And if you want to, I guess you could have taped that down all the way. And up here. Okay, now for how I'm going to store my patterns, I'm actually going to keep this traced out and spliced piece on top, because that way, while I'm hunting through my stuff, at a glance, I can see what manipulation I did to get this piece ending up this way, and that's going to help me know if that's the one that I'm going to want to use in the future. Okay? And again, just so that this is going to hold still, I'm going to flop a piece of tape over the edge here and over here. Okay, so this is going to be my sleeve back piece. My sleeve piece, and my bodice back is just going to be is what it is. So let me clear off all this stuff and get my fabric, and we'll start cutting out. But you need to remember, these are the sewing lines, not the cutting lines. So you need to add seam allowance around here before you start cutting it out. Just throwing that out there. Okay, so I've got it on here. This is just some lightweight printed muslin. Now, the pattern itself is the sewing line. I want to add my my cutting line. I'm using 5/8 of an inch. So if I put my clear ruler down here where I can see where that mark is, I can just draw it. And that works great for the sides. You can use a little piece of measuring tape, which is 5/8 of an inch wide, going around, eyeball it, whatever you want to. Just make sure you add in your own seam allowance. Down here at the bottom of my sleeve, I'm going to make a narrow hem. For me, I still use 5/8 of an inch for a narrow hem because I turn it up about a quarter and then turn it up about a quarter, and you know, that's close enough. So I am also adding 5/8 of an inch at the bottom. But on my little notepad, because this is going to be my instruction manual I'm kind of creating, I'm writing down that on the sleeve I have a narrow hem, and that's just going to remind me how much space I added. If I wanted a wide hem and I added a couple inches down here, you know, I would mark that down so I know what I'm planning for. So let me go ahead and get this marked and then cut it out on my cutting line. So before I take this off, on the right side of each one, I'm making a little mark. And this is a heat erasable pen, so it'll disappear. But I'm making a mark where that center top part is, and I'm putting the letter B on the back and the letter F on the front. Okay, just to make it easy for me to see later. So this is done now. And I'm going to grab my bodice front piece. Okay, so this is doubled here. And I've got my front now. Before I add my seam allowances, what I need to decide is how I'm going to deal with this front closure, because this is just on the center front right here. I'm going to want to put a little button. So my buttons are going to be going down at the center front, but say, okay, getting a piece of paper is actually very helpful. If that's where I want my buttons to be, and that's my center front, and I want my little placket to be, or not placket, but the little fold over area, whatever we're going to call it, to be about that wide. Okay, if I sit that on my center front, then I can say, okay, all right, so if this is where my buttons are going to be, actually overlapping it, so my buttons will be in the center of this thing here. That looks about right. This is about an inch wide. So I'm just kind of putting this here. It's about an inch wide, but that's going to give me an idea because my buttons I'm going to have in the middle of it, okay? But I'm going to try to make this as easy as possible, so I'm just going to be adding fabric. So if this is my center front, and what I'm going to do is just extend this so that I have enough fabric to put a little piece of interfacing and fold it all the way under, okay? It might actually be easier. It's harder to explain than it is to do. If this is my center front and I want it to protrude beyond that about 1/2 inch, okay? So if you can kind of see the shadow at this point, I'm laying that here. All right, so this is where my pattern piece ends. This is extending out a little bit more. That looks like about 5/8 of an inch actually. But then I'm going to want enough fabric that it's going to double all the way back and come probably to about here, so that underneath here I also have fabric that I can attach to. So that is right about here, and then I'm going to want another little piece of seam allowance to fold underneath it. That is to about here. This is just for generalization because when I sew it, I will make it work. So if I leave my finger there, that shows me that I want to add about 3 inches from this center front line here. Okay, so 3 inches out. Again, as I'm sewing it, I can make those adjustments. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and once again put some weights on here to hold it down. Okay. And get my big ruler And at about 3 inches out here, go ahead and draw that line. Okay. But I'm also going to put a little dotted line at the center front. Dotted lines is my understanding of a mark that says this is the center of something. Okay, so I have a little dotted line I've drawn there. Now at this point, the rest of the way around, I'm going to use the 5/8 inch seam allowance. In the darts, these are not terribly wide, so I'm just going to draw, it'll be easier with this on this little fabric. I'm just going to draw the seam lines in. Okay, we're not putting seam allowances in here. If it was a very thick fabric, or if these were very wide darts, I would. But for this blouse, it's not necessary, in my opinion. And again, this is just the way I do it. I am not in any way saying this is the 100% proper method, but it works for me. And that's what my video is about, just showing you what works for me, you know? All right, so now I'm going to come through and just continue like I did on the sleeve, marking down 5/8 inch all the way around the outside edge and then cutting it out. Okay, I'm going to run downstairs for a snack because I'm hungry. But before I get anything cut out, what I did is I made a little mark on my cheat sheet here that for the center front, that's CF, I added 3 inches for the self-facing. That's the word I was looking for what this is. This is going to be my self-facing. Okay, now when I do cut this out, I want to make sure that I mark that center front on both sides. Okay, this side and this side, and I want to make sure I mark these dart lines on both sides. Okay, I'm back. So before I take my pattern off and flip it over and transfer my marks over there, a couple things. First of all, I put pins all over in my seam allowance to hold it together in my darts and things like that. But what I want to do before I take this away is mark where my buttons are going to be. Now, since this is tailored to me and I know this is the fullest point of my bust, I want to make sure that there is a button directly across from that point. Okay, so I'm just going to draw a line that way. I'll make a little crosshatch in a bit. Okay, so once I have that mark, then I can go ahead and strategize my button layout. I'm going to grab, if I can find it. I found it. It was where it was supposed to be, actually. Okay, so with the understanding that these are the seam lines, and so I'm going to want, and this is ending at my waistline, and I'm going to have a band going across down here. You know, you have to kind of think through what your final design is going to want to look like. So I'm going to want a button, about 1/2 inch or so from the bottom here, okay? So I'm just lightly marking that. And with those 2 marks, get my little buttonhole guide here. Lay it this way would probably work better. With these, you stretch it beyond what you want and then compress it. Okay, and that way it's even. So that's what this is, you know. So if I have a mark here, 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 and I'm going to leave the top one blank. I don't like things buttoned up all the way to my neck. Now, if I wanted them spread out farther, I could do that. You know, I could do 3. I could do however many I want to. Just figure out what works for you. I think that's going to be fun. I like the idea of a whole bunch of little buttons going on down there. But this is going to be my center here. So I want to make sure that those lines are going to go all the way across, because when I actually sew them on, this is the line I'm going to be sewing my buttons onto. Okay, so that's just me, but the main thing is that you get to pick where this one's going to go. That's the key one. Okay, so with that done, you can take this off. Remember, this line is 3. Write it down again. Wrong ruler. 3 inches from the outside edge, so I can remember that in a short period of time. Okay, so I'm going to lay this back down, make that line here first. Okay, since I have that line on there as a guide then I can lay this on because this is going to go right along it, center this top to bottom so that I have the 5/8 inch mark there. Put my weights back down and I'm going to trace out the darts. Oh my goodness. Okay, so now that I have this on in the right place, I can come back and just trace out where the darts are. And again, it would be easier if I just placed my ruler here and did that. Make sure you're drawing on the fabric and not on the paper, because that's kind of pointless. But having your pins on the fabric in the seam allowances and at least one inside each dart is going to hold everything in place where it needs to stay. And after this part of the cutout is also going to be done. So let me get this done and then I'm going to grab my bodice back and we'll get it cut out. Okay, now this is my back piece. Now on my back piece, the center back here is going to be put on a fold, all right? And just like we did on the front, there are really no markings here except the dart, so I'm going to be tracing inside that dart and then adding the 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around the entire piece. And just like last time, I have my seam allowances pinned together, so I can flip this over, line up my center back edge so that my seam allowances I have spaced out are even. Okay, go ahead and put my weights back down and trace out the darts over here. Okay. And there are other pieces I'm going to need. There's going to be the little band at the bottom, and there's going to be the neck facings, but I'm going to deal with that afterwards. I have enough scraps of fabric that I can do that. What I want to do right now is actually go ahead and get started putting this together because it's been so long since I have sewed something. And since I have my back piece here right now, one other thing before I forget, I want to mark where the center back is up here at the top. You can't see that. I have a little line I'm drawing up there, okay? And then down here at the bottom, I'm drawing a line also on that little fold, okay? So I have those positions marked. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in my darts. Okay, this is the right side of my fabric now. Thankfully, this fabric is thin enough that I can see through it because actually when I make my darts, I want to be looking at this side. So if you're following along or you've jumped to this point, when you're actually doing all your drawing and everything, try to make it so your fabric is inside out and not right side out when you're doing all of the previous stuff. But I can still see the ghost image of that. I'll go ahead and redraw it just for funsies here and get that marked up. All right. Sorry if my lines are faint. I know, I always get reprimanded for that. What I'm going to do is stick a pin down about 5/8 inch in on this side and have it come up at about the same position over there and push it through. Rain just started, that's fun. Okay, and then up here at the top of my dart, pinch it there and pull this down and make it nice and flat so I have a nice crease. And then up at the top, I'm going to put a pin in. This is extremely lightweight fabric. Okay, and set this one in. So there's one, and now I'm going to go ahead and pin the other dart the same way. And I'll use the same process on the darts on the front also. I'll show you Honey came in to say hi, if you remember. She was a little breeder mommy dog that, from a rescue, and she is just a little love. She is just such a little sweetheart. So I think she's going back downstairs now. Anyway, I wanted to show you, I'm going ahead and I'm going to go ahead and put in the darts in my front piece also. Not pressing yet, but I'm going to go ahead and sew them in also. I wanted to show you, I am pinning my dart. This is the side dart over here, and because I changed somewhat the angles of this dart, I want to show you. I'm just going to put this pin in here along the stitching line and open it up. Okay. And it's not exactly level anymore. That is coming out by maybe a fat 1/8 of an inch there. That is okay. When it's sewn, I can just come like that and even it out. Okay, but for right now, it's going to be fine. So what I'm going to do is go over to my sewing machine, and for all of the darts, I start at the outside and I come all the way up to the corner. And I'll probably back stitch it because, you know, it's just a little top. All is good. And get that done on both 2 darts on my each front piece and both of the darts on my back piece. For the machine of the day, I'm going to be using this little featherweight. I recently finished her off, so I just want to see how she's going to do. Unfortunately, I only have a blue bobbin in her. But for this project, that's going to be fine. So yeah, she's the machine of the day that I'm going to use. So, like I said, I'm going to start it down here at the bottom, at the open edge. Figure out which foot pedal. I've got several down here. Okay. I'm going to back it up at the edge. And I need to get my pins over here where I can reach them. My goodness, I need to clean up my table. Come all the way up. And off the edge. And I am going to back it up 1 stitch, you know, just for funsies. And then go on to the next dart, starting at the outside edge and moving in. Okay, I have not pressed those pieces yet because I want to iron some interfacing on this front part while I'm doing it. So I'm measuring the front of this point here, and that is 16 3/4 inches. Okay, I'm going to cut 2 3-inch wide strips of this, and we should have enough to be able to just fold it here. Hang on. Like that. I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 3-inch wide by 16 3/4 inch long pieces. This is a very lightweight fusible interfacing, the stuff I usually use. And let me get that done and I'll meet you back over at the ironing board. And in general, rotary tools annoy me because those little round blades get bad spots so easily. So if it's a fabric that I can, I like to just cut it with a razor blade because that's a lot more reliable to me. All right, let me move this down so I can get 16 3/4 right there. Cut this off, oopsie. And I'm ready to go back to the ironing board. Okay, so this is the inside. I've got my dart folds here and everything of one of my front pieces. And I'm just ironing this part just to get it nice and smoothed out. And grab one of my pieces. Now, you would think I would put it right at the edge. I am not, however. I'm going to move it in about 5/8 of an inch so that I have a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Because remember, I measured this off of my pattern, which is the seam lines, not the cutting lines. Okay? Make sure the fusible part is down. And just press it on. Since this is such lightweight interfacing, it doesn't take a whole lot to get it fused in place. Okay, so now that is on. That's going to give enough body to that front part. For my side darts, they are going to get pressed down. Okay. For my darts that are going along the waistline, they are getting pressed towards the side seams. Okay, like that. So on the outside, they're pressed nicely. I'm going to go ahead and do all of my pieces that way. I want to point out, while I was ironing my back piece, I did not iron over my center back mark down here at the bottom or at the top. I want to leave those right there so I can find them later. But I did press my darts out. So now that everything is pressed, now I'm going to serge all the way around all three of these pieces. And I wanted to get my darts in and press them first, so when I serge over the edge, it's going to lock the bottom part of that dart in, going the correct position, okay? And I just serge barely over the edge, try not to cut off any fabric. I just do it that way. It's how I like to. If you want to zigzag it, fine. If you don't, that's fine too, but I like to do it that way so that later on I can press my seam allowances open and everything can function as it should, and when I wash my garment, it's not going to fray. Okay, so with all of that done, my serging done, I actually should probably iron it, because sometimes after you serge it, especially a very lightweight little fabric like this, it's going to want to roll up, but for this project, it's going to be fine. I'm putting my fronts right side up here. Just ignore that little roll. And my back right side down, and I'm going to be matching up the shoulder seams. And whatever seam allowance you chose, you are going to use that to sew with. For me, it's 5/8, so I'm just going to repeatedly say 5/8 because that is what I did and that's what I'm used to, okay? So straight across the top of both shoulders, 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then press those seams open. Okay, so this is what it's looking like right now. I'm actually going to put this aside for a minute because I want to work on my facing pieces. So and at this point, you know, it's a design option. It's up to you how you want to do it, but I'm thinking I want a facing that's probably a finished width of about 1 inch, okay? And that means that, if I can find another piece of something here, if, say, I have a facing that is sewn on, okay, so this is a stitching line here. If it's sewn there and it's folded over, and I know this is white on white, sorry about that, but then it's folded under again so that I have a nice stitching line here. Instead of it 1 inch working, it's actually going to be closer to a 2 inch piece, okay? But let me get a piece of paper here. This is my front neck piece here. Okay, so we're just going to work on that first. Find a piece that is big enough. I think this will work. So remember, my seam allowance is 5/8 of 1 inch. So yeah, I think that should be big enough here. What I'm going to do first is just with a pencil come in and just outline where the sewing line is, okay? That is the sewing line there and here, so I can get this piece out of the way, all right? I'm looking in here. Now, I'm going to want a piece that has a 5/8 inch seam allowance. All right, so here's my neck. Here, this dotted is my center front, and this is the sewing line here. I'm not going to draw it in marker yet. What I want is to add 5/8 inch seam allowance up here, okay? I want to add, that's a thick line now, a 5/8 inch seam allowance in here. And where this line is coming through, I'm squaring that up just coming straight out. Okay, so that's 5/8 there. And then the center front, or, yeah, this is the center front. I am adding 5/8 of an inch here also. Okay, so this line out here is the one I'm looking at now. Now, if I wanted it to be 2 inches or thereabouts, all right, so from this point here is 5/8. I'm just going to add 1.5 inches. I think that's a good enough thing. So I'm just going to come around here. Just do it this way because my ruler is running into stuff down there. Put a little mark at the 1.5 inch point. And I'm hoping that this makes sense because I'm kind of doing it as I go here. So my final front facing piece, this is going to be the cutting line here, up here, well, pretend that I didn't run off the paper, up here, and here, okay? And I'm going to need to make 2 of these. So let me go ahead and cut out this piece, set it aside, and we'll get our back piece out. Okay, so this up here is the seam allowance. So the seam is actually at this point right there, okay? So when I come down here, this part with my very faint dots there is lining up with the center front, okay? So that's good. That is good. That's going to work for me. Now let me get my bodice back piece out. Oh, and another thing you could do, which would honestly probably be easier than this, is before you sew your shoulder seams together, and I would say once you have it serged and everything, like say this is my back piece that did not have the front sewn on yet, so I'm just going to fold it so it looks like that. Okay, you could just trace that out, you know, that would probably be a whole lot easier, but I don't choose to do things the easy way all the time. So again, doing it this way, this is my back piece, and I am first just going to trace along the seam line down a few inches like that. Okay, here. Now, same as before, adding a 5/8 inch seam allowance. There's there, there's there. Adding 5/8 inch here, here, okay, up there, and then from this point down, adding 1.5 inches, which is right about here. Okay, so coming back with my paper scissors. I just realized something I did wrong. This center back is cut on a fold, so I did not need that 5/8 inch seam allowance over there. So I'm just going to splice that off, okay, because that's on a fold here. And I'm going to draw my little cut on a fold symbol, okay, and come back and cut this out up here. Okay, so this is my back and this is my front. You know what? I think it's supposed to be this way, and I did them opposite sides, but that's okay. If this is the seam line for the front and that is for the back, if I line them up, it's going to fit, okay? So this is the halfway point at my center back neck, and this is my center front. Now, the sewing line is actually down here. So this looks really tiny, but when you realize this is the stitching line down here, it'll fit a lot better. So I'm going to need to cut out 2 of my fronts. Front neck facing. And where this little dot is, I'm writing CF for center front. Okay. Back neck facing. Now, I'm saving this because if I decide to change the neckline on a future project, if I'm only like lowering the front neckline, this back piece should still fit, you know, if all I'm doing is extending this one down. So, you know, it might not hurt to go ahead and label and keep. I'm going to go ahead and get these cut out, and I am going to use the same interfacing that I used earlier and get those pieces interfaced and then serge all the way around them. Now these 2 pieces are slightly different than my blocks because they do have the seam allowance included, okay? So I need to make sure that, you know, I note that somehow for future me, but for right now I understand that. If you would like to be a purist, you don't have to include your seam allowance lines and just add them to your fabric every time. But since I standardly use 5/8 inch anyway, you know, it doesn't hurt anything. Alrighty, there we go. So there's my front. Now let me cut my back out, and I'm cutting it on a fold. I have my interfacing with the dots, the fusible side up, and I just am laying out my little pieces on there like this, and then I'm going to take the whole little piece over to my ironing board, and then I can just tack iron these on, flip it, and with a press cloth press it. Okay, I have a Teflon press cloth that I can press all of this, and then the sticky stuff doesn't stick to my iron. So here it is. This is my little Teflon baking sheet. I'm not using steam on here because honestly it would just kick back up in my face. Well, I could. You know, why not? I also don't want to steam up my camera. Okay, that should be enough to get them all tacked on. Like this. Okay, so they're not going to go anywhere. And honestly, I could have just flipped it over, but I want to show you. Then I'm going to put my Teflon sheet right side up. I have a hole there, but it's for another purpose, so that's another story for another day. And put that on there, and then I can just lay on my steam and press them down really well. Okay. And all of this is just going to peel up off of that sheet, doesn't leave any yuck, and I can just cut them around the fabric now. Okay, so at this point I have them matched up at the shoulder seam. Now if you look, the front top edge and the seam allowance is in farther than the bottom. That's okay. What's important is at this point, 5/8 inch down where the sewing line is, that they match up, and they do. So that is fine with me. I'm going to go ahead and just straight stitch across these on both sides and then press these seam allowances open. Okay, so I have my facing piece here done, but I'm not ready to sew it on yet because I want my finished garment to look like this. And here's the buttons, okay? Where the facing, the neck facing comes around, and I have my stitching on the outside, you know, just because. You can put it on the inside if you want. And having this edge. But what that means is before I can sew this on, I have to get this self-facing down the front taken care of. So I'm going to go ahead and put that aside and grab my constructed bodice piece here. Move this out of the way. Oops, that is my scrap fabric. Hang on. Okay, and we're just going to do one side at a time here. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and iron this, because see how it wants to curl with that serging? not good. I'll be right back. Okay, got it pressed. I used just a bit of light magic sizing just to, you know, hold it in place and everything. All right, so what I'm going to do is, once again, because I've erased it when I ironed, mark where my center front line is, which was 3 inches in, okay? And that is the dotted line. Okay, so there's my center front. I know you can barely see it, but trust me, it's there. Now I want the actual folded edge of my center front opening to be about, we're going to call it, because 5/8 is the magic number today, 5/8 of an inch in. So I'm going to draw another line, 5/8 of an inch in from that center front line, and I'm going to make this one solid. And again, these will erase, so don't worry about that. Okay, and what I do on this side, I'm going to do on the other side too. Okay, so can you see my 2 lines here? On the solid line, I'm going to fold it. Okay, and let's just put some pins on that fold to hold it now. And this is interfaced right here also, so it has a bit more body than the rest, which is what I want. Okay. Okay, so from here, the center front is here, okay? If I want my placket thing, self-facing, to be positioned so that it is centered, I need the other fold of it to be 5/8 of an inch on this side of that line, of that dotted line, okay? So 5/8 plus 5/8 is 1 1/4 inches, all right? So putting this down this way, get my ruler one more time and line it up so at my edge I have 1 1/4 inches. And I think I probably cut this a little wider than I needed to, but that's okay. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, because I have extra fabric, if this bothers you, you can pink along this edge. Basically, we're going to be folding it in. So I would say, if it bothers you at 5/8 of an inch or less from this line out here, you can pink it. Otherwise, you can just fold it straight in, which is just going to add another layer of thickness where the buttons and everything are, which can't hurt because honestly this fabric is super, super light. But that does add a couple layers of interfacing, which might make it too thick if you used a thicker interfacing. So for the sake of doing things the right way, I can see this line here. I'm going to get my pinking shears and about 1/2 inch away from it or so, I'm going to pink off that edge like this. Okay, so that's going to be my folding line. That's my pinked edge. The pinking is going to remove all of that extra bulk. So again, what I did here, I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side of this front opening over here, and then we'll be back. While I'm doing this, I'm thinking, I know I said that little featherweight was going to be the machine of the day, but honestly, I feel like she's just too small for garment sewing. There's just not very much space there, and she's a little lower than I like, so I am going to be swapping her out for another full-size machine, or maybe just use Rosie, my big industrial over there, because yeah, those are great for little bitty things and little handy to-go projects, and I know that people in quilting clubs love them and everything, but for this type of thing, I don't think that they are the optimal machine, just saying. Okay, so now I have this all pinned here, and I'm going to go over to my ironing board and just press it nice and flat. Now, however you want to finish this off, you do you. It is your garment. You can top stitch it from the wrong side. You can whip stitch it up the inside here. You can use a decorative stitch along the edge if you have that on your machine. You know, do whatever you feel like. You can put a piece of straight stitching on there and then some trim. That would be lovely. You know, that's part of the fun of making your own design up, is you're not bound by anyone else's dictates. So let me go ahead, press it, get it sewn, and I'll show you what I do. Okay, welcome back. It's actually been a couple days. First, my camera battery ran out, and I was going to pause just for a bit, and I got sidetracked, as you do. So cleaning up my stuff here. I went ahead and sewed my front. This is going to be the one that has the little buttonholes in it, and I had some little micro rickrack, so I put that on because you know what? I can, and that's fun. So now that that is on, I'm going to do my facing. And what I want to point out right now is that I have absolutely no expectations that anybody else out there is going to want to make themselves a blouse like this. But that's not the point. The point is to try to figure out how to work through the process so that when you are going to be making what you want to, you know how at least somebody walked through that thought process. And whether you agree with it or not, you know, sometimes it's fun to see. So first I'm just going to place this little facing that I did last time on here just to see how it's going to work. And you know what? It looks like I misjudged just a bit because this is too short. I actually would have preferred to have my facing sticking out about another ½ of an inch. Right now it comes level here. So I need to decide what I want to do. Basically how much trouble I want to go to for a little around the house kind of blouse. So what I'm going to do, because sometimes trying to jimmy rig something to make it work is actually more work than doing it the correct way, what I'm going to do is just sew an extra little piece to my facings so that they will be the correct length. And I'm not going to be interfacing the little piece I put on because it's basically just going to be a folded piece. But what I am going to do is get just a scrap of this fabric here. And this is way too big, but you'll get the idea. And this actually is on a selvage, just for fun. I'm going to lay that here, right about there. And I'm putting it right sides together. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew it, you know, at my 5/8 inch seam allowance, okay? And I'm going to do that over here and also on this side. Now, for future me, what I should do is go back to that pattern piece that I made of my front and go ahead and redo that and extend it out another 5/8 inch over here. Okay, so I've just got them sewed on, little seam allowances pressed open, and just to make sure that I cut things similar here, I'm just going to lay it out flat, etching up those seams, and over here. Okay, so this is where it ended, and I want it, I'm going to be generous and give myself actually probably an extra inch. I can trim off the extra after that. So where this line is on my seam allowance there, I'm going to put my ruler. I know you can't see that, but trust me, I am. Going to draw a line out here, an inch farther, and come over here. Add a little line there, and a little line here. That looks pretty good. So I can put a pin on it to hold it in place, and just come back and trim. And it really didn't take that much longer just to fix a mistake, you know. But trying to make it work, being too short, you're going to end up doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's just, you're not going to be happy with it. So at least I wouldn't be. I can't speak for you. Who am I trying to speak for you? Anyway, I need to decide before I put this on how I'm going to deal with this outside edge. And what I think I want to do is just make a little tiny narrow hem. So I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and just kind of, as I'm stitching it, turn it up and make a straight stitch all the way around. Okay, so I'm over here on Rosie, my big girl, and I'm just going to show you getting it started. Just turning this up maybe about a 1/4 inch or so. And it's a good idea if you can have something sharper to hold, okay? So I'm just going to get this here and just get started turning it in. Go, and this is a curve, so you're going to have to kind of work it in, or if you're doing it along with me. If you have little puckers in this fold, that's okay. It's not going to show up, you know. So just kind of like that, working it all the way around, and then I'll end up with a nice little folded finished edge over here. Okay, so that's kind of what it looks like. And when I was first thinking of doing this, I was going to put it so that my facing was going to be on the outside. But I'm having second thoughts, and I think I might put it on the inside. So if I did want it on the outside, though, it's going to basically look like this, you know? And my little lines are going to be below it, which isn't that bad. You know what? Let's go for it. Why not, huh? Okay. So in order to do it so that my facing is going to be on the outside like this, that means that I'm going to need to sew this. I need to turn it to this way. Sorry about that. Okay, placing wrong side up and putting this right side down. That way when I flip it, it's going to look like that, okay? So this is going to be opposite of what you would normally do. Normally you would be on the right side of your fabric, putting this, you know, on it, but over here I'm doing it this way just because I want to. And that's, again, part of the fun of creating your own pattern and your own design. So I'm going to pin it over here at the shoulder seams to make sure that those are correct. And this is very lightweight fabric, very lightweight interfacing, so I'm not too worried about all this bulk right here because there really isn't that much to deal with. All right, now coming over here, the edge of my little seam allowance here is actually going to line up with the edge there, which is fine. That is perfectly fine. I am going to have this little seam visible on the front, but it's a very busy pattern, and I don't think anybody is ever going to care. Okay. And here. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my sewing machine and add a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Go all the way around here. Okay, so I've got that sewn on. So I'm going to want it to lay nice and flat. So the next thing that I'm going to do is come in here and clip to within about 1/8 of an inch of that stitching row, which is right there. I know it's very faint. Okay, all the way around. Again, if this fabric was thicker, I might worry about grading the seams or something. It's just not, so I'm not going to worry. But I am clipping like every inch or so. Okay, now up here where all the seams are, that is a bit thicker. So if yours is too thick, you know, trim off one, trim the next one a little bit higher. That's the grading, that's staggering it so that you don't have, you know, all of your thickness ending in one big step. Okay. Once I have this, I am going to understitch it because I like to. And again, it's my pattern. I can do what I want to. So you understitch it on the invisible side, the side that nobody sees, okay? So on this, actually it'd be easier if I started over here. What I'm going to do is push, nobody wants to see the inside of my blouse, okay? So I'm pushing my seam allowances so they are underneath here, not up here, down here, okay? And I'm going to put my row of stitching right about here, okay? So here is the seam. See, here's the seam. This is where I'm going to do my row of stitching, about 1/8 of an inch or so in, maybe a little less, okay? But I want to make sure that I'm going over all of this seam allowance when I do it. Okay, so now that that is done, I'm going to iron it. So I've turned it over to the right side now, not worrying too much about all this extra stuff sticking out the front. I'm just going to come at the seam line and fold it over and give it a nice press. And that understitching is going to help me do that. It's going to pull everything towards the bottom, okay? Just ignore my fingernails and everything. I work in a shop. It's dirty up there, okay? All right, so I'm just going to continue folding it over, pressing here at this fold line, all the way around the neckline. All right, so now that that is done, and I can see how far out that extra piece I cut is sticking out, I'm going to come and pink it off so I have about 3/8 of an inch or so sticking out, okay? I'm going to fold that in. I probably should have cut this in more at an angle so it wasn't sticking out so much. Okay, that was just down in the seam allowance. I'm going to fold it in like this and put it straight down. So basically this is going to cover the very top up here, which is fine. Let me get a pen and stick that in. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Then once they're both folded down and everything like that, I'm going to come back and top stitch along this front part here and all the way along this little edge that I previously put a little row of stitching on. Again, if I wanted to, I could put more rickrack on there, and at this point I don't know if I'm going to or not, but I just might. You know what, I think I will. But I wanted to show you, because the way that I have this folded, what I'm going to do is put my little piece of rickrack here underneath this little folded facing so that it's inside like that. And then when I start doing my top stitching, I'll just have that to go around with it, okay? So let me go ahead and get that put on. Okay, so I've got that done, and actually before I go much further, what I want to do is come back and mark where I want my buttonholes to go. Let's see, I decided that I didn't want any along the very top, I think. Which, you know, I still don't. But what I did want to make sure is that I have this position correct, okay? So keeping this so that it's level with the bottom here. I think that is good. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead, actually I'm going to be putting a band at the bottom. I'm going to move this up like a 1/4 inch. It's still close enough that I'm in this ballpark. And again, this is a heat erasable pen, so that's okay. I'm just putting a little crosshatch where the center of my buttonholes are going to be, okay? Now, since these are on a blouse, I actually want them to be vertical. I don't want these to be horizontal. You put the neck one on horizontal usually if you have one, and I might just draw it on there. But the rest of these need to be vertical. So this band is 1 inch wide, so I'm going to split the difference and draw a line halfway down. Okay, so I have that line drawn. And now I know where the center of each button needs to be. I have not picked out my buttons. I don't know what size buttons I'm going to use yet, but at least I have this position all ready to go. And I'm going to leave that until it's time. I just wanted to get this out of the way here. And with this, I need to make a mark to add 1/2 inch or so, okay, on my little front facing piece. Okay, so what I want to do from this point is sew up my side seams, which is very easy, just matching up, you know, the side front to the side back, stitch it at 5/8 of an inch, and press that seam allowance open on both sides. Now, I want to show you one thing. When I was pinning it together, don't know if you can tell, but my front piece is ever so slightly larger than the back. Just is what it is. These things happen. When I sew it, I am putting the larger side face down against the feed dogs, and I'll sew it this way, even though that's bottom to top. You know, it's a blouse, so it's okay. But that way, the feed dogs can work any extra, so it won't pucker. You know, if you do it this way, and you're stitching, there's a chance that you could get to a point where it's going to want to do something like that, which is never pleasant. You know, it's not the end of the world, but it's not pleasant. But if you sew it with the larger side down, it rarely happens. So just wanting to point that out in case you have that situation. Okay, so I've got that done. And if you're doing this, this would be a great point for you to try it on. Okay, because at this point you can take in or out the side seams and things like that to make it fit better. I'm going to call it good, actually. And I was going to put a band around here, but now I'm thinking I may just do a little narrow hem. Because when I did do a quick try on, I was thinking, you know what, a little narrow hem would be fine. So I'm just going to turn it up like this. Basically turning it up about 1/4 inch and then up another 1/4 inch. And, you know, thinking back, if I had known that I was going to do this before, I might have done something different with these little bottom edges. But again, this is the trial run of our block pattern as a real garment, and it's just going to be a little doing things about the farm type blouse. And yes, it's a very short blouse, but I wear a lot of overalls, and I also wear a lot of denim work skirts. And something like this, you know, it won't be tucked in. It'll work fine. It's all fine. So let me go ahead and finish pinning this up, and then I'm just going to edge stitch it all the way across the bottom. One more thing, because my waistline, because I am working in a full bust adjustment and all that kind of stuff, it's not a straight line, it's curved. So because I serged it before, that makes it a bit tighter. And it might make it hard to make a hem because parts may want to be a little bit tighter than others. What I do is where my seam allowances are, where my darts are, I just fold it up straight. Okay, but look, right here in the middle, it's a bit snug. So I'm just going to come in and make a couple of little cuts, maybe 1/8 of an inch deep. Not much, just enough to give it a bit of flexibility. And then I can lay it down nice and flat, which you cannot see. Sorry about that. So then the hem's going to lay nice and flat here, and that'll look a lot better. So maybe as you can see from my mess here, I decided I was going to use snaps. And so I dumped out my whole big snap and Velcro thing, and I have umpteen million little ones of these little pounding kinds of snap setters. I'm actually using my grommet setter instead. For some reason, I've never been able to get these to work that well, but you know, you kind of inherit them. I've got the top ones on here, and then once I got those on, then I kind of lay it over here and come underneath and mark where the corresponding center should be. So, and I don't think I have these exactly centered, but again, you know, I think that it's going to be good enough. Okay, so I only did 5. I decided since I'm never going to button it up here at the top, why waste a snap? So let me go ahead and get these bottoms ones set. I am using the little 2-part ones where you put the little prongy part on and then you smash it together with the other part. But again, I'm using my grommet setter. But these are supposed to work. Again, I haven't had much success with them, but I'm going to go ahead and do that and I'll be right back. So it's me, it's the next day, and at first, I need to tell you my whole drama. When you last saw me, I was getting everything together to get these snaps put on the front here. And snaps can be great when they work great, but unfortunately, I was really struggling with those little prongs going the wrong way and everything, and you know, it makes you crazy. And I had switched out one of the little pieces on my press, my grommet press, and instead of clamping the 2 pieces of the snap together, it punched a hole in my fabric, a great big hole. And at that point, you know, this is about 45 minutes into trying to make quick and easy snaps, be quick and easy. I wadded up the whole thing, threw it in my trash can, went downstairs, told my husband I need tacos and margaritas, and we went into town and did that and came home, took a nap, and it's the next day and I'm feeling better. So, you know, things happen. And I was trying to decide how I'm going to approach this because I ended up having to put a little piece of fusible interfacing on that part that I punched a hole in, you know, it's fine. It's just an around the house kind of blouse. And I was thinking, what the whole point of, oh my gosh, I just ripped the entire snap off. Look at that. The whole thing came off. Oh, that is so par for the course here. But the thing is, what is the whole point of this blouse? The whole point of this blouse was not to make something gorgeous. It was just to show that the block pattern could be used to make a wearable item. Am I out a lot of money on this fabric? No. Is this a lifelong goal to make this little top? No. But am I going to power through it? Yes, I am. I decided, I pulled it out of the trash this morning and, you know, we're going to move forward. I got to fix that snap just because I don't like having unfinished things around in my room. I have a lot of downfalls, but that's one thing. I'll either power through it and get it done, or I'll get rid of it and get it out of my sight. But I don't like things just lingering in that unfinished stage. It's just one of my little things I can't handle. So with all of that, we're going to go ahead and get these sleeves done. They're just simple set-in sleeves, nothing extravagant. This shouldn't take more than half an hour to get the sleeves put in and this thing finished. And we're just going to go through it. But I just wanted to let you know, yeah, the struggle is real. It's definitely real. It doesn't have anything to do with the pattern. It's just very lightweight fabric. My snaps weren't right. I don't think I had the right little tool set into my grommet press. And it was just one of those things. So anyhow, let me turn the camera down and we'll just pick up where we left off. Okay, so I've got my sleeves here. I have them folded right sides together. And on the back piece, because remember I marked which one was the back, I have a little letter B that I've written up here so I can figure out what that is. And what I need to do is, normally I would serge all the way around them first, but because my patience is at a minimum right now, I'm going to go ahead and sew them right here at 5/8 of an inch. And then come back and serge all the way around it. You know, we're not going to get fanatical about pressing these seams open because we just need to get through it. It is at that phase. So let me go ahead and do that. Serge around them. and then I'll be back here and we will get them set into the little blouse. Okay, so at this point, my sleeves are sewn together. That is just serged together, serged around the top, serged around the bottom. I will probably just come back and make a little narrow hem around the bottom like that and stitch that on. Okay, and so I have the letter B. Can you see it right there? Marked there, and I have my center top marked. Or I did. Here it is. Oh my goodness, it's barely showing up there. I need to mark that a little bit better. But I need to get those places matched up, so I'm just going to grab one side here. This is the right side of my blouse. Okay, this is the shoulder up here. Well, let me flip her open this way. That'll make more sense. Okay, so this is the bottom seam, this is the back, this is the front. I want to make sure I put the right sleeve on the right side. So if I put my sleeve right side out, okay, and I lay it here so that my bottom seam is matching, this has the letter B for the back, this is the back, that's the right sleeve for this side. So I'm going to start out just matching it up down here. And remember, when I cut out this sleeve, I did add a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So that's what I'm going for. I did not add fullness at the top, so I shouldn't have to, you know, put in any gathers or anything. But there's a chance that there might be a little bit of easing. You never know. So I'm going to match up this center top mark on my sleeve to my shoulder seam up here. And get that pinned. I'm pinning down both sides of the top seam allowance so it won't fold up on me. Okay, so first of all, extremely lightweight fabric, you know, is what it is. The point that really needs to get matched up is 5/8 of an inch in, and the outer edge of my sleeve piece is going to be bigger than the outer edge of my armhole piece. That's just the way the physics works, and because I serge this, and it's like the lightest of light stuff here, it stretched a little bit as I was serging on that bias. But the way that I'm going to work that in is easing it in. So I take the side that's smaller. So on this blouse, the side that is smaller is the bodice part, not the sleeve part. The sleeve part is stretched out of shape, okay? And I'm going to fold it and go, I've got my 2 points down here, up here that are good. I'm folding it so that the shorter one is on the inside and kind of just curving it around this way, okay? And that's going to kind of evenly space it out. And put a pin halfway through. Okay, so you can see if I hold it straight, you can see that this is bigger. If I'm folding it again, like that, okay, averaging it out, putting one in the middle. And then when I sew this, just like I said before for the side seams, the side that is bigger, so in this case it's the sleeve side, I will put that on the feed dogs, okay? So when I sew it, I'm going to be looking at it this way so that the feed dogs can work underneath their magic and it's going to be nice and straight with no puckers. At least that's the goal. So let me go ahead and get both of these sleeves pinned on, go to my machine, stitch it at 5/8 of an inch all the way around, and then we'll be back. Okay, so I've got that sewn on and I need to come back here and in this lower part, normally if this was a really good garment, what I would do is do the bottom row twice, okay? But you know where we are here. I am putting some little clips about every inch or so. I'm staying about at least 1/8 of an inch away from my stitching line, which you probably can't see. It's right here. Okay, so that's where my clips end. You don't really need to do it up in the upper part as much as down here in the bottom so that it's going to lay nice and comfy. There's 100 different ways to deal with this issue, but that's how I'm choosing to deal with it right now. Now, I've just done one sleeve so far, but I wanted to show you I did go ahead and just put a little rolled hem in the bottom while I was over there. So let me get the other one done and we can try it on. Okay, so I want to show you a few things. First of all, if you look close enough, you'll see I just have straight pins where those snaps are. When I pulled it open, all the snaps came apart, and it's Thursday, midday. I don't have time to redo this before I edit this video. But, okay, a couple things. First of all, one of the things I wanted to make sure of with this mock-up blouse is where exactly waist level hit. Because, if you remember, this is supposed to be at my actual waist, and I have, you know, one of my little work skirts on here, so I can see that at where the bottom is here, that's pretty much at my waist. Now, if I pull my arm up, yes, it's going to go way up, but that's just life, that happens. Do the sleeves fit? They do. They are in the proper place, in my opinion, for my shoulder, and I think they're good in the back. Do I have the right amount of ease that I would feel comfortable in a blouse? I think so. I can move and I'm not fearful of things pulling apart. Now, I could take a little more in if I wanted it very form-fitting. I could, and I can remember that's the amount of ease that I have built into my block. If you want yours to be a lot more fitted, go ahead and take it in on your block. It's yours. You can do whatever you want to. Is the sleeve length that my block is the right length that I want as far as my day-to-day stuff? Yes, because that's where I want it. I want it right about at elbow length so that it doesn't get in my way here, because I'm a very busy person. I do a lot of things and I get tired of rolling up my sleeves sometimes. Okay? So, in general, is it doing what I need it to do? Yes, this blouse is. Did it nearly push me over the edge? Yes, it did. But I think that a lot of that is because the material, it's honestly that disposable type weight material. And this is the perfect thing for just doing a mock-up type blouse. You can see this microphone is so heavy on it, it's weighing it down. But I can see that my darts are pointing to the right place, and you can see how easy it is to manipulate dart placement and everything. So I hope that, you know, even though this isn't a wow, amazing garment, that it is successful in the intent that I had for it in the beginning. So anyway, there you go. Hope you liked it. I'm not too sure what I'm doing next time. Who knows? It's probably going to be a video every 2 weeks because I'm so busy, but I enjoy doing these. So hope you liked it, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.